Hi, everyone. My name is Abby Shelton, and I work at the Snipe Museum of Art at the University of Notre Dame. And I'm going to be presenting today with my colleague, Rob Fox. So Rob, if you just want to introduce yourself.
Hi, my name is Rob Fox. I'm the manager of one of the software development units within Hesburgh Library at Notre Dame.
So we're both new to the Samvera conference, so really excited to be here and share an ongoing project with you all. So in this session, we're going to talk about connection, how we're connecting people and applications to provide access to our digital collections at the University of Notre Dame. I'll start by talking a little bit about those human connections, and then Rob will follow to describe more of the technology links. So just to set some context, like many projects, probably all of you are involved with, this one really started with a grant. So in 2017, the university received a grant from the Andrew W. Mellon Foundation to create a unified digital space for archival, library, and museum collections. So what you're seeing on the slide is a nice compilation of objects from those campus partners. And this was really filling a need for all three campus units. The art museum on campus where I work had no online catalog for its collections, and the university archives and library had no real centralized place for their digitized items. Some of those items are spread across some boutique digital exhibits, sites, and then others were housed in our institutional repository. So while the grant was written like many grants with a pretty broad mandate, and a worthy goal, provide unified access to these collections, which really have a lot of overlapping themes and uses. We quickly discovered, of course, a pretty fundamental challenge, which was that our digital files, our metadata, and our people were squirreled away in various silos, both human and technological. So the way we approached this was not to migrate everything to a new system, but instead build and strengthen connections across our human and tech ecosystem to make these collections more accessible and usable to our community. I want to acknowledge that we're not the first to take more of a modular approach. There have been some really great recent articles in the Code for Lib journal, for instance, and also there was a really wonderful Open Repositories presentation last year by the University of Denver, who are taking a little more of this approach. So our project goals, as encapsulated here on the slide, again, were pretty broad, as many grants are. Basically, we wanted to get more digitized content out into the world. We wanted to work together better as a museum and a library. And we wanted to experiment with some new to us technologies like IIIF and Amazon Web Services. Because we didn't have any concrete technical deliverables, i.e., the platform had to function in a certain way, to further define our goals, we went immediately to our community, which I'll talk about next. And you see a logo here on the slide. In case you hear us refer to MARBLE, that's the name or acronym for this project, and it stands for Museums, Archives, Rare Books, and Libraries Exploration. So although we were working under this grant mandate, and we do think about what the grant means, our starting premise wasn't really what does the grant say we have to deliver, but instead what does our community need? So the flashy bits of our community engagement looked like this. The picture you see on the slide is me talking to a student. We did some kind of flash user experience testing last fall where we offered donuts and other treats to students walking by in our library lobby in exchange for their observations, obviously pre-COVID. But the majority of our community engagement has looked like sitting in faculty offices, staff cubicles, campus coffee shops, and classrooms with over 100 students over the course of this project to listen to what they have to say about using collections online. And in the first year of the project, we did sort of an initial round of those conversations to ask people about their kind of basic use cases. And to some extent, the answers that we received weren't all that surprising to us, but good to confirm what we sort of already knew. For instance, one of the major requests from our faculty users was wanting to find lectures or images to use in lecture notes or PowerPoint presentations. And then, a big request from students was wanting to find materials for class assignments or refinding images of objects that they had seen during a class visit. So after these initial rounds of community conversations, we took the information we had gleaned and we went through a series of not unfamiliar steps. It was great to hear Northwestern's presentation this morning because I think we did a lot of similar things. So it's great to see others are thinking in the same way. So we began by prototyping even on paper, as you see here in the upper left, and getting feedback on our early wireframes, which were very basic. And then we built several iterations of an alpha prototype and put them in front of people. So you see in the lower part of the slide an image of me sitting with an undergraduate student using the site. And then we've built towards a beta over the last year doing some of those similar steps. So we've gone through a testing cycle about every semester, sometimes multiple times a semester, using both formal and informal methods. So every semester we'll do a very sort of formal recruitment effort with students to sit down in sort of one-on-one sessions, but then we also will show, paper or PDF copies of user interface designs to colleagues, as we see them. We have pivoted completely to online testing as of March, and we are currently testing with students this semester completely online. So we've used LibWizard, which is a SpringShare product, mostly used for teaching and instruction, but we've used it to create an asynchronous testing module that students can complete on their own time. So I won't go into the specifics of what we've found since we only have a few minutes, but I do think that this connection with the community has been crucial for our team. And I think Northwestern also highlighted some of these points, so that's great. For this project, we've really seen how integrating user experience work into our normal workflow as a software development team has really grounded us. So instead of, jumping ahead to build a finished product, we've really tested things, whether it's features or page layouts, as they've been built so that we can confirm and improve upon those as we go. We decided after those early conversations with users to focus on the student experience. This wasn't to exclude other groups, but sort of the mindset that if we could make this digital collection site useful to our more novice users, then others would find it intuitive as well. And this has helped us prioritize some features that were most important to students, particularly the ability to browse and do keyword searching. We've also seen this mindset sort of spread to other teams involved in the project. For instance, at the museum, in our metadata work, I've started to see our curators begin to reference user needs in a way that perhaps they haven't done before. So they're now thinking about applying keywords to these terms that would help students search and find objects rather than relying on really specialist knowledge or jargon. So speaking of our colleagues, how have we been engaging them as collaborators around these community needs? We realized pretty early on that we needed to enlist broader institutional support for this effort. So we formed 4 different project teams, which I've listed on the slide: content to focus on content selections, metadata to resolve some metadata issues, workflow to create or improve existing digitization workflows for the library and museum, and then the software development team. Speaking of the development team, one of the most significant things I think we've done is place a developer on all of these teams. So they're able to provide more of a technical perspective, but also just to listen kind of unfiltered to the needs of their colleagues. So I'm going to focus for a minute on the metadata and workflows team, since I think some of our strongest cross-departmental connections have happened there. So our metadata team is composed of folks from the library and the museum. All of the teams are actually composed of folks from the library and the museum. Has really been central to the project. So they've built a really incredible metadata mapping document, spreadsheet, that maps the metadata found in our museum collections management system, which is we're using Embark, our ArchivesSpace instance, which is used by our archives department, and then IIIF, which is our library catalog. The mapping spreadsheet really has been the foundation for allowing us to make connections across collections, and allowed each department to maintain its own best metadata practices, but then allow the end user to navigate across those collections. We'd be happy to share that at any point if anyone here is interested. In addition, this team has been really great in pivoting and moving to respond to user needs. So once we heard from students about the importance of kind of big, broad keyword searching, browsing functionality, this team has been working on enhancing the keywords that are already attached to our objects. So they've been mining the Library of Congress and Getty hierarchies to include related terms, so that we can really facilitate that searching and browsing that students were after. And then the workflows team is also composed of colleagues from both departments. And the work I want to just mention briefly from them that I think has been really instrumental in that connection piece has been the rights conversations, which are really super in progress right now. We're currently working on a decision tree that empowers content managers to make some decisions about when and how to share collections information with our copyright experts. But I think this has been a point where the museum has learned from the library and vice versa. So for the museum, from our perspective, we're much more free, feel much more free to share copyrighted works online. I think the library has, not that they're fully ready to put copyrighted works online, but they have definitely become more open to the idea where a fair use argument might be made. On the other hand, I think the library has been really interested in using unified rights statements like rightstatements.org, and also really open access designations for public domain works, where the museum previously was interested in putting some more restrictions on those objects. So we haven't quite worked out the differences between each unit, but I think this has been a team where we've really learned from each other in that respect. So that was really quick and at a high level, but I'm happy to talk more at a later time. So now I'm going to turn it over to Rob to talk about some of the ways that we approached the technology side of the project.
Thank you, Abby. As you can imagine, with a project of this scope, which we had not really tackled previously, the multi-sourcing of data, since we decided early on in this project that we wanted to take advantage of the existing workflows and the existing expertise from the museum, from the library, and folks within archives. So multi-sourcing into a system like this is definitely one of those major challenges. Another challenge that we have is that we do not have a formal digital asset management system currently in place with the library or with Notre Dame at all. So that means that any of the original object files that we wanted to use and in-source into the system are stored in multiple locations. And that presents a logistical problem for us, for sure. And then finally, and this is true, I think, for every single organization that would have a system like this, but data curation, record curation, and the management of metadata, as you know, is not always consistent. It's not always well maintained, or it's incomplete. In some cases, it's entirely missing. We had certain cases where the collection level metadata is stored in one system of record, and the item level metadata is stored in a completely different system of record. And we have to figure out ways of trying to wed that data together, which is a challenge all on its own. Next. I'm going to go very briefly into the different parts of the architecture for Marble. And if you have any questions after this, any detailed technical questions, we're going to provide our contact information. But there's a lot that I'm going to cover here, and I'm going to do it very quickly. we've broken up the architecture of Marble into several sub-processes or several sub-pipelines. And the first of those pipelines that we decided to decouple early on was the image processing pipeline, because it has its own set of challenges. And in the diagram that I'm showing here on the left, there are two ways of sourcing image files into this image pipeline. We use the metadata from the source system to try to determine if we have a pointer to an image, and then we use that pointer to ingest it into the image processing pipeline. Sometimes we have to rely on storage systems in the background that are not tied to the metadata at all, and those also source the image processing pipeline. Then we go into two steps that run in parallel. The first step is, of course, we have to create various derivatives of each of the images. And so that's done at that step. And then also, as a side process, we are making a copy of the original with the hopes that in the future we will be able to feed that to some sort of preservation system, which we do not currently have in place, but we are taking that step currently. After all of the derivatives are created, then they go into a shared storage system, which right now is an S3 bucket in AWS. And that shared storage area is accessed by a IIIF image service. This is actually based on code that we got from Northwestern. So thank you to Northwestern for that, that we've been refactoring and using as our IIIF image service. And then the front end then will access that IIIF image service to look at the pointers and then pull the images into the front end UI. Next. The second major processing pipeline that we have is the metadata processing pipeline. And as Abby indicated, we are sourcing from several different systems. We have three canonical systems that we're currently sourcing from. One is Embark, which is used by the museum. The second is Aleph, which is the library integrated system. Then we also source from ArchivesSpace for archives related content and RBSC related content. And then we have a couple of ad hoc methods that we use that where we are sourcing from non-canonical systems. So that could be a file system or a one-time harvest from a particular source. And I will mention that one of the systems that falls within this ad hoc area is our institutional repository, which is Curate. We had a very difficult time harvesting from Curate, mainly because harvesting took so long. It could take up to a day and a half to harvest one collection of a couple thousand items. So we only did that once or twice in getting the metadata into this processing pipeline. The second step is normalization. And this is where we take advantage of that spreadsheet that Abby mentioned that maps from the source system to the fields that we want to use in Marble. And then the next step is data enrichment. And Abby also mentioned that this step is using several different sources that are industry standard that we use to enhance the quality of the records. And some of those include the Getty Art and Architecture Thesaurus, the Getty Iconography Authority, and the Library of Congress subject terms. If there are subject-related fields in the source record, we will also use those to enhance the metadata and make the discovery process much richer. The next step is a serialization process that takes all of this aggregated data from the previous two steps, and then we normalize that out into something that we call standard JSON. And so we use that standard JSON further down in some of the other processing steps to actually build the site. So that standard JSON is then also stored out in S3. Next. The site builder is also completely decoupled from the other two pipelines that I talked about. And the central technology that we're using within this component is a product called Gatsby. Gatsby can use React code um, to aggregate data by querying a data source, and we use GraphQL to do that. So Gatsby will query various data sources. In this case, we have a metadata store that refers back to the previous pipeline for metadata, and it will query that as a data source, ingest that data, and then it has the ability to create static site pages. So this is important for a couple of reasons. It's important for performance in some ways, and it's also important for search engine optimization because that was a major concern that we had going into this project. So Gatsby will then produce several different types of static pages. It produces general site pages such as the home page, etc. It produces result fragments. So when someone does a search within the search interface, then the results that come back, each of those results is a result fragment. And so we pre-render that so that it performs better. We also produce collection level pages and then item level pages. But there is still a large piece of the application on the front end that uses React in a dynamic way. So there are still dynamic aspects of the site as well. It's not completely static. Those pages then go into a page store, and then the parent SPA will either call a pre-rendered page or a pre-rendered fragment, or use the dynamic functionality to render the page. Next. Redbox. Redbox was not something that we originally planned on at the beginning of this project, but it is a stopgap measure in order to solve some of the problems that we encountered related to the sourcing of metadata and also the relations between the descriptive metadata and the item level records. The name actually comes from our process diagrams as we were discussing and mapping out how the system was going to work. There were certain areas of functionality that we knew that we needed, but we weren't sure how we were going to achieve that. And so in that area of the diagram, we would draw a red box. This has nothing to do with the video renting service at all. On the left of this diagram there, you can see that Redbox draws on two different data sources. One is the metadata store that I talked about earlier. Actually, Redbox uses a sidecar metadata store to pull on, and then also the images that had been processed via the image pipeline. The user interface for Redbox allows curators to see a list of collections of metadata, and then also images that are stored in the image store, and then they can connect or associate those two types of records and also choose a default image, excuse me, for that particular record or for that particular collection. So this allows them to do record association, which is the next two boxes on the diagram, and also record enhancement. So we have not implemented this yet, but this would also allow curators to enhance records that have incomplete descriptive metadata associated with them. Then this is processed and put back into the metadata store, and then the site builder then queries this unified or aggregated metadata store to build the site. Next, future challenges. One of the commitments that we made early in the project, which is a huge challenge for us, and we're still not sure how we're going to handle this, is that we do have a commitment to open source the components of Marble, but obviously that will be a challenge trying to attract potential adopters and then also building a community of contribution. So, so that will be a future challenge for us. Data sourcing is going to continue to be a challenge for us because we need to write adapters for every source system that we harvest from. The library is planning on getting a new integrated library system within the next couple of years, and so we will have to completely rewrite that adapter. And then also we need to solve problems, for example, with Curate, where it's very difficult to harvest metadata from them. And so we need to try to solve those problems as well. An ongoing issue for us, and we've talked about this previously a little bit, is of course metadata quality and trying to get good, well-maintained metadata records in the various canonical systems, and also creating new metadata for records that do not exist. And so that will be an ongoing challenge. And then any software system becomes dead the minute that you stop maintaining it. So continuous improvement is something that we now try to commit to rigorously for any new project that we take on. So this is where we have a method that we use in software development at Notre Dame where we're always working closely with product owners and the users of the system to make sure that the functionality of the system is still relevant. So we have that challenge of trying to maintain those connections and then also continuously improving the source code of the system itself. And then also getting those commitments from organizations around the university that contribute content to Marble to make sure that we're getting that steady flow of data into Marble. And that's all I have, and I can turn it back over to Abby.
Yeah, so we wanted to include our contact information here if you have any questions or want to talk further. And I think we've left maybe a couple of minutes for questions.
Thanks, Abigail and Rob. We don't have any questions in the Q&A section here. There might be some trickling in the Slack channel that we can keep an eye on. But we do have a few minutes. If anybody has a question, please do post here.
While the questions are coming in, we also have a project microsite there. So if you're interested in just looking at what we have so far, that would be the link.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that. It would be nice to add that link to the Slack channel if you can.
Sure. I am not on the Slack channel, but I will get on there and we can add it. I think we also have some Notre Dame team members who are probably on that who could do it as well.
Mm-hmm. Sure. Yeah, and you can even post it here on the chat as well if you can do that. So there is one question. Is there time for a quick demo? Which I don't know if it would be possible. I'm answering it on your behalf. You can go ahead.
Yeah, I don't know if the person is referring to the front end or the back end, but if you contact me, I'm happy to send you a link to our beta version of the site if you're interested in seeing how the front end works. In terms of some of the back end processes, I'm sure we'd be happy to show those as well. So just get in touch with us and we can arrange that.
Mm-hmm. Thanks. There's another question from John Wise. Will you be expanding to include more content sources?
That would be our eventual hope. So we have some other campus partners that I think we would like to involve. Other departments on campus that have collections, and we anticipate that they would have their own collection management database. So I think that's our hope and intention. We don't have any, we're sort of sticking with the major 3 sources for this scope of this project, which we're hoping to launch the site next year, and then the grant will end next summer. And then we'll look into what those future integrations might be.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. There's one more, and we'll do this quickly because it's almost time. Question from Alberto Martinez. Not sure if I missed it, but where in the workflow are you assigning pearls?
Oh, that's a great question. We are not actually doing that at this moment. Am I right in saying that, Rob? That's definitely
that's correct.
Yeah, that's something that we're interested in doing but have not done yet.
Okay, that sounds good. There are a few more questions coming in. If you can answer it in the Q&A section,
Sure.
that would be great.